Good morning, literacy learners, and welcome back for another wonderful episode of At Home with APS Summer Edition. My name is Miss Maggie.
And I'm Miss Mary.
And we are back focusing this week on what animals live in New Mexico. But before we get started, we have another message from one of our wonderful librarians here in Albuquerque.
And, I happened to mention this librarian yesterday when we were talking about one of my favorite authors, Ryan Higgins, because he came to Albuquerque and spoke at one of our schools. Well, I think he spoke at a couple of our schools, but he went to Mitchell Elementary.
Yes.
So if you are a student at Mitchell Elementary School, I have a message for you from your school librarian, Mrs. Bowden. And she says, say yes to books this summer. Now that message actually should be familiar to them because that is something that Mrs. Bowden says to them all the time. And she got that saying from another amazing author, Kwame Alexander.
Fantastic. That was a great message. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move forward with our lesson for today. Focusing on this essential question, what animals live in New Mexico? Now, today is our last day that we will be focusing on this particular question because next week we're going to expand our knowledge of animals out from New Mexico to the world. And so that will be really exciting for us next week. Now, today what we're going to do is we're going to use a text feature, a nonfiction text feature that we've kind of talked about before, especially when we read stories like Pigs on the Farm, Chickens on the Farm. We saw it on a couple of these pages, Miss Mary. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this picture to take a look at some features on animals that are in New Mexico.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing what you've got planned for us.
Perfect. Well, this picture in the center here is called a bobcat.
Oh, I've seen bobcats before in the wild.
They are very common wildcats in New Mexico and in most of Northern America. Now, what I did is I used my background knowledge and I went and found resources to create labels about features of the bobcat.
Now let me think back for a moment because as you mentioned, we saw labels in some of our nonfiction books when we were doing farm animals.
Yes.
Maybe you could remind me by showing me what labels are.
Exactly. I'll give you an example. Here's one example of a label. A label is a small piece of text that's often close to the object that it's supposed to be describing.
Right, and I think sometimes I've seen labels where there's actually a line connecting the text to the part that it's going to.
Absolutely, and that can be a part of it as well. Now, one of the things that was in our farm book that is not in our picture is that in the farm book, it was only one word. It was a noun to describe the actual part of the body. But I added something a little extra on this label. I added the noun, which is fur. That's the thing on the bobcat. But I also added something, another word that describes that noun, that gives us a better picture of what that noun actually looks like, feels like, smells like, so on and so forth. And so I said thick fur.
Oh, so you're telling us more about the fur. What kind of fur?
Exactly. This is something we call adjective. Can you say adjective? That's right. Adjectives describe nouns. Let's see what other nouns and adjectives we have for the bobcat. Hairy ears. Now, Miss Mary, which word is the noun?
Well, I know that ears tells us a thing. So that has to be the noun.
Yes.
And then what kind of ears? Well, hairy ears. That has to be the adjective.
Yes, exactly. Hairy describes the ears, so hairy is an adjective. Let's try a couple other examples. Sharp teeth. In sharp teeth, which one is the noun? That's right. Teeth. Teeth is the noun. Sharp describes the teeth, so sharp is the adjective. Oh, let's take a look at this one. Big paws. Which one is the adjective this time?
Oh, we're having to listen closely to your questions.
Absolutely. What is it? That's right. Big. Big is the adjective because big describes the paws. Let's see what other features are on a bobcat. Oh, why don't you try this at home? That's right, long legs. Long describes the legs. Let's try one more on the bobcat. Very good, short tail. So short tail is for the bobcat, that label, where short describes its tail.
I like having those describing words on there because it really helps me to understand more about the different characteristics of the bobcat. Like, I don't know that I would have known that a bobcat has thick fur. I mean, of course I can see and I know that it has fur, but thick fur helps me to understand a little bit more.
Absolutely. And on top of that, knowing that we have these labels, we are able to get a better picture of what a bobcat looks like from those adjectives. Now, in thinking about the bobcat and the habitats that it lives in, you can see how some of these descriptions can help understand why a bobcat can live in that particular environment. For example, it probably needs big paws in order to walk carefully on the ground that it lives on, and probably sharp teeth to find the food that it needs to survive. Let's try another one. Oh, this is a coyote. Coyotes are very common in New Mexico, and a lot of us in Albuquerque have probably seen coyotes walking around just out of nowhere on trails and sometimes even streets.
Very true. There's actually a coyote den very close to my home.
Oh, wow. I did not know that, Miss Mary. So let's see if we can take this idea of nouns and adjectives and use that for labels with the coyote. All right, let's take a look at this first one. Long bodies. Miss Mary, what is the adjective in this one?
Well, let's see. Bodies is a plural word, which means more than one. If I were to think about what that means, that has to be the noun.
Yes.
Because it tells us what part of the coyote, the body. Okay. What kind of body? A long body. That has to be the adjective.
That's right. And doesn't it create a picture in your head?
It actually does. And it made me look again at that coyote and look at, yeah, that is a long body.
This one says good hearing. Now this one's interesting because in this label, we're not actually just talking about the ears, but what the ears can do. So a coyote has good hearing with his ears.
And look at how big those ears are. So I suppose you could have said big ears, but we can actually see that. Good hearing tells us that really, in addition to having big ears, it has good hearing.
Yes.
That's a lot of information from that picture.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yellow eyes. This can actually be a really helpful label for us because if you look at the picture, it's a little hard to see the coloring of the coyote's eyes. So the label helps me to understand the picture a little bit further. Oh, sharp teeth. Did we already see that one, Miss Mary?
We did. In fact, we saw that on the bobcat. I wonder if that's a common thing that we're going to see in some of New Mexico's animals.
I think so. What this also helps me do is it also helps me to think about what was the same and what was different already.
Right.
So you can do that with labels as well. You can compare them to find what is the same and contrast them to find what's different. Oh, I recognize this one too.
And you know, that is so funny because I was just thinking as you were talking about same and different, and we were talking about the sharp teeth, I started looking to see what else might be the same as the bobcat. And I thought, well, that has thick fur too. I wonder if there's going to be a label for thick fur.
And there is thick fur. Oh, here's another one. Bushy tail. We saw something about the tail on the bobcat as well. But was it a bushy tail on the bobcat?
It was not. It was a short tail.
So now we can see how adjectives can really help us compare and contrast as well, because both of those animals have tails, but the coyote's is bushy and the bobcat is short.
You know, that is so interesting. As I was looking at it and you were pointing them out, every step before you, I went ahead and I asked myself two things. First, I was asking myself, I wonder what she's going to say about the tail, because it could have been long tail.
It very well could have.
But I thought the word bushy tail really helped me to understand better. Thick fur helped me to understand it better.
Yes.
Those describing words were details that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Exactly. So adjectives is really what helps us create clear pictures of what nouns look like. And it helps us to describe them better. Now, that being said, does that necessarily mean that we couldn't have used long here?
Oh, no, sure, we could have used long.
Oh, yeah. Just because one adjective has been used doesn't mean that you couldn't use other adjectives or more than one adjective to describe a noun.
So we could have actually said long, bushy tail.
Absolutely. This is something that you could do at home as well with a picture, similar to what we have of the animal. Practice identifying the noun, the thing on the animal, and see if you can add one or more adjectives to that noun, like Miss Mary just did with long, bushy tail.
I love it.
Let's go ahead and let's move on. Well, the reason we had a bobcat and a coyote in our warm-up for today, our building of language and background knowledge, is because they are going to be the focus of our read aloud for today. And so our read aloud is titled Land Predators of North America. And it's by Aaron Pembry Swan, and it was published by Franklin Watts. And I'm going to mention the year that it was published too, because this is going to be important later on. And it was published in 1999.
Wow, that's the year that my youngest son was born, and he's almost 21 years old.
Wow. Yeah, that's a little over 20 years ago. So let's talk about this title first. It says Land Predators of North America. I know what a lot of those words mean. Predators might not be something that I'm too familiar with, but I'm going to think on that a little bit more as I read about the bobcat and the coyote, and maybe I'll be able to figure out what predators are by the end.
Now, I remember we did something like that when we were trying to figure out the meanings of unknown words.
Yes.
We were using context clues. So we were using the other words in the sentences, and we were using the pictures. It sounds like you're going to build some of your own background knowledge as you read, and then you'll be using the clues from the book to help you to understand the meaning of the word predators.
Exactly. So in the table of contents, when I first open up this book, the very first part of it will tell me what is a land predator. Now, we're not going to go to that page today. I want us to kind of think and make inferences about what a predator is as we read about a couple of examples of predators. Today, we are going to be focusing on bobcats, predators in the woods, and coyotes, predators in the grasslands. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Now, one of the things about this text is that there are multiple paragraphs, as you'll see on this page. There's not just a small part of text. So here's what I'm actually going to do as I read. I am going to do something called summarizing. Can you say summarizing? That's right. So every so often, readers need to stop reading and they need to put it all together into a big idea, a big important idea. And doing this can help us become an efficient reader because we think about all the information and how it all fits together. And today I'm going to model how to do that because it will help us later on.
You know, I find that that's a really good strategy for me to use because I do a lot of reading, not just because I'm a librarian, but because I love learning.
Yes.
And that's the way that I like to learn is by reading. But sometimes, especially if there are a lot of paragraphs and a lot of new ideas, I find that my mind starts to wander a little bit. And if I stop myself and pull myself back to the words or to the text,
Yes.
and then summarize or think about what I've just read, put it into my own words, it helps me to stay focused.
Absolutely. So we're going to be doing that today as we read about bobcats and coyotes. This is bobcats. And for right now, I'm going to skip over this part right here and focus more on the text. It is midnight. 2 bobcat kittens follow their mother into the dark forest, creeping after her through the underbrush. The spring air is alive with the sounds of animals moving all around. Although the kittens are only 3 months old, they have grown quickly and are now big enough to hunt for themselves. This is their first time, and they are ready. The young bobcats will hunt with their mother all summer. As the weather grows colder, they will begin to hunt on their own. Soon, they will leave their mothers to find their own mates, make their own dens, and have their own babies. I'm going to pause here for just a second and see if I can summarize what I just read. And when I summarize, I'm going to take those big ideas and see if I can put them together in about 1 to 2 sentences. It's pretty much for a good summary. So I read that young bobcats hunt with their mother, but will hunt alone as they get older. They will also find a mate, make a den, and have their own babies. That's pretty much what I got from reading these first 2 paragraphs.
So basically, it was telling us about how young bobcats grow up in the wild and learned how to go out on their own.
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's try the next part. Full-grown bobcats are expert hunters. They eat anything from a snowshoe hare to a squirrel to a blue jay. The largest northern bobcats can bring down a running deer. Bobcats are the most common wildcats in North America. They live in forests, on hills, and in swamps. They are sometimes seen in open farmland. Because they can survive on a diet of small animals and can live almost anywhere, bobcats have not been pushed out by people. Some even live happily near large cities. So let's try summarizing that part. Bobcats are common wildcats that are expert hunters. They can live almost anywhere and survive by eating other little animals. That's pretty much what I got from reading this section here. And I took those most important ideas: common wildcats, live almost anywhere, small animals, expert hunters. I really focused in on those key ideas to make that summary.
And I saw that even though you pulled those words, those important words, directly out of the paragraph, you didn't just reread those sentences. You put them into your own words.
Absolutely, because that's how I make sense of words as an efficient reader. I take what is on the text and I build it into my own background knowledge in a way that I can build connections and make it into something I understand. Let's try the next one with a coyote. And just like before, I'm going to skip over this little box here about the coyote. A series of sharp yips splits the cool desert evening. A coyote stands alone, calling out to its friends. The yips turn into a howl, and one by one, the coyote's friends join in. Soon there is a chorus of howls, rising and falling and rising again. Each evening, these coyotes begin the night by singing together. Just before dawn, they sing together again. It's their way of letting each other know where they are. Coyotes come out at night, ready to hunt and play under the starry sky. They live together in family groups of parents and children. They play together, but usually hunt alone. So the big ideas that I got out of those two paragraphs is that coyotes hunt alone at night, but live with other coyotes to sing and play. That's essentially what I got from that. Coyotes will eat almost anything. They prefer mice, ground squirrels, gophers, and woodchucks. But if these animals are in short supply, they will feed on berries, snakes, or insects. In the winter, coyotes watch the sky for circling vultures. They know that where there are vultures, there is a tasty meal to be found. In Native American stories, the coyote is often called the trickster, and coyotes are very clever animals. They can live almost anywhere. Because their natural habitat is shrinking, coyotes have moved into wooded areas close to large populations of people. So in summarizing those two paragraphs, I read that coyotes eat small animals, but will also eat berries, snakes, and insects. They are clever and can live almost anywhere. That's pretty much what I read.
And you know, something that I got out of that is that, as I mentioned, I have a lot of coyotes by my house where I live. And that last line, because their natural habitat is shrinking, coyotes have moved into wooded areas close to large populations of people. That helps to explain why coyotes live very close to where we live and where our neighbors live, because maybe their own habitat is being taken over by people And so now we have to share our habitats.
Exactly. Now, in thinking about these two examples of a bobcat and of a coyote, I think I'm starting to get a clearer picture as to what a predator might be, based off of the summaries that we were able to do. And so, in my mind, a predator is an animal that can hunt and eat other animals.
Because they both had that. They were talking about how they're hunters and about the types of things that they eat, which both included animals. But also there's something else that, now that I think about it, was a really good clue. Those labels that you attach to the pictures, they both had something else. Sharp teeth.
That's right, sharp teeth. And what I can do to confirm my idea is I can actually look at a glossary, just like what we have here. And we see the word predator right here in this glossary, an animal that catches and feeds on other animals. That's our definition of predator. And so by using summaries and getting those big ideas, I was able to figure out what a predator was. So that was pretty good, huh?
Well, and I liked that it helped me to stay focused on what we were reading,
Absolutely.
especially where there's a lot of new information. I really have to retell it to myself so that I can kind of fit it into what I'm learning and what I already know.
Absolutely. And this is something that you can do at home as well, boys and girls, and all of our students out there, is that if you're reading a lengthier story, pause every once in a while, take those big ideas and fit them together in a way that helps you to understand what you're reading. Now, we did it 2 paragraphs at a time. You could even do it after 1 paragraph to see if you got the big idea.
You know, this reminds me of something that we were talking about yesterday. Yesterday, we talked about finding books about New Mexico.
Yes.
And how in my library at S.Y. Jackson, we, our New Mexico books tend to be written for our 4th and 5th grade students.
Yes.
So for our kindergarten, first, maybe our 2nd grade students who might look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of reading. That is a lot of reading.
It is.
So what you could do is do a read with on that. So read with someone else. They could even read those sections to you.
Yes.
And then the 2 of you could work together to summarize those main ideas.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to bring up one more important thing about this book. In terms of learning more, remember at the beginning how I mentioned that this book was written in 1999, making it almost 20 years old? Well, a little over 20 years old, actually. One of the things important to consider about our nonfiction books is how long ago they were written. Time is an important factor when we're considering when books were written, because those books, when they were written, reflect the knowledge at that particular moment in time. So if I was to look for these books or at these websites might not exist anymore. And additionally, these might not be the only books that I could look to find out more about predators. There might be some newer books that would have better information or more information.
That's always a good thing to keep in mind, is to check that copyright date, which tells us when the book was written.
And so sometimes when we read those kinds of things, in terms of learning more, time is an important factor. So that's important, students. Time is important when thinking about the nonfiction texts that we're reading, and even some of our stories. Let's go ahead and let's move forward with our high frequency words this week. We learned them on Tuesday, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep practicing them again. And I have some new sentences for us.
Now, we've learned so many of them. I have to think back. Tuesday feels like a really long time ago. to which words we're using this week.
Well, I'll give you a hint. I'll use our first high frequency word in a sentence.
All right, I'm going to pay attention and see if I can spot it.
Coyotes are close to people because their home is smaller.
I think I heard it. Did you hear it?
I'll write it out for us. Coyotes are close. Oh, I see that vowel consonant E. Close to people because their home is smaller. And a period at the end. This is a very long, expanded sentence. But Miss Mary, did you hear our high frequency word?
I did. As soon as you said the sentence, it helped me to remember that one of this week's high frequency words is because.
That's right. Because. Now, when we have a long sentence like this, we can't say this whole sentence in one breath. It would be a lot. And if we were to try and do that, it would sound very rushed, very fast, and possibly hard to understand. So we're going to practice scooping this sentence in a way that still makes sense, but it's not word by word.
And we practice scooping when we do our fluency lessons,
Yes.
helping us to put words together that really make sense together.
Yes. So for example, I'm going to scoop, coyotes are close. Let's try that scoop together.
Coyotes are close.
Two people. Let's try that.
Two people.
Because this one is just going to be its own scoop on its own. Because their home is smaller. Let's try those two scoops together.
Their home is smaller.
Listen to how I scoop this sentence. Coyotes are close to people because their home is smaller. You don't always hear automatically the scoops, but there's a natural flow to it. Let's try that all together. Ready? Here we go. Coyotes are close to people because their home is smaller. Very good. Let's try another one. The next sentence is, the book said that bobcats hunt for food. Let's try that.
The book said that bobcats hunt for food. Did I get all that?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go ahead and write that sentence out for us. The book said that bobcats hunt for food. I hope everyone is at home trying to spell and write some of these words in their heads as we're doing it together. Did you hear the high frequency word?
I did.
What's a high frequency word?
Said.
That's right. Said.
I also spotted a high frequency word from last week. Did you happen to spot that one?
Which one was that one?
It was for.
Oh, so we should already know that one. Now, let's think about how we would scoop this sentence. Miss Mary, what do you feel would be the best scoop for this sentence?
You know, as we were saying it to begin with, I was already trying to figure out how we would scoop it. And what I heard when we were saying the sentence was that we were already kind of scooping it with our voices. The book said that bobcats hunt for food.
Okay, so we already have some natural scooping in there. Let's try each of those scoops all together and see if we can read it naturally. Let's start with the first one. The book said that bobcats hunt for food. So words can be naturally grouped together, so that way it makes more sense when we read it.
You know, I wonder if there could have been another way of scooping it.
Absolutely. If you had the sentence possibly written out a little bit longer, it might have been more natural to scoop some other words together than what we did here. For example, we might have done, the book said that bobcats hunt for food.
We could have even said, the book said that bobcats hunt for food.
Exactly. There is no right or wrong way to scoop, as long as it makes sense to you. Let's try one more. All right, here's the sentence. The coyote was singing. The coyote there's that word coyote, was singing.
I just spotted a suffix ending to one of those words.
I was wondering if you were going to catch that. Did you also find our high frequency word?
I did.
Which is?
Was.
That's right. Was. Now, how might we scoop this sentence?
Well, it seems to me that we could have the coyote was singing. So we could scoop the coyote, and then we could scoop was singing.
That sounds pretty natural to me. Let's try that all together. Ready? Here we go. The coyote was singing. Now, if you notice, this time, this was where we actually scooped in between lines rather than stopping at the line and then scooping at the next one. Like we said, there's no right or wrong. Let's go ahead and let's move forward. Oh, for this one, we found some really cool vocabulary words that all meant moving in some way, but moving in different ways. So we're actually going to do something called define, example, and act.
I love it when you have us act out words. It's so much fun. I hope you'll join us with this part.
Absolutely. So now's the perfect time to get off the couch, get off of the chairs, the floor, wherever you're sitting, so that way you can move along with us.
I'm even going to lower some of these books so that they'll be able to see more of our bodies and how we move.
Perfect. All right. The first word is creeping. Say creeping. Creeping means to move slowly and carefully, much like this bobcat is moving slowly and carefully by the river. So the bobcat is creeping alongside the river. Let's act out creeping. Are you acting out creeping with us at home?
You could probably do it on your hands and knees, but we can't, because if we did that, you wouldn't be able to see us.
Okay, let's try another word.
Okay.
The next one is following. Say following. Following means moving after or behind. So you're still moving, but you're moving after or behind someone or something else. Like these ducks are following the first duck along the beach. That's how they're moving. So, Miss Mary, I'm going to pretend to follow you.
Now, we get a lot of practice in this in school because when we walk through the hallways, we follow along in a line. When we go back to school, though, that might look a little bit different, right?
It very much might.
Because we have to make sure that we keep distance.
That's right.
So, let's follow by keeping distance.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for letting me be following behind you.
I love acting these things out.
Oh, it's so much fun. Another way to move is come out. So for example, we have come out, the coyote comes out of the den. Now this is actually a picture of the wolf, but the word come out was with the coyote. So come out means move from not being seen to being seen. So we're going to act out, moving from not being seen to being seen. Now let's come out. That's how we would come out. We are moving from not being seen to being seen. That was so much fun. But now we're going to move into our comprehension. And so for our comprehension, I have our summaries that we created with the bobcat and with the coyote. And we're going to talk about what was the same and different between those. So for the bobcat summary, we said originally, young bobcats hunt with their mother, but will hunt alone as they get older. They will also find a mate, make a den, and have babies. Bobcats are common wildcats that are expert hunters. They can live almost anywhere and survive by eating other little animals. That was one summary. The coyote summary said, coyotes hunt alone at night, but live with other coyotes to sing and play. Coyotes eat small animals, but will also eat berries, snakes, and insects. They are clever and can live almost anywhere. So let's think about what was the same and what was different. And this can help us compare coyotes and bobcats. So let's first talk about what was the same.
Well, in thinking back to the two summaries, I remember that both of these kinds of animals will hunt by themselves. They'll hunt alone.
Good. Hunt alone. You know, I also remember that they can live almost anywhere.
Right.
Do you remember something that was the same? That's right, they eat small animals.
Do you remember that one? We were talking about that when we were talking about the meaning of the word predator.
Now, as we finish up this side, let's think about what was different. What was different about them?
You know, there were a few differences also in their hunting.
Yes.
Now, I remember that the bobcats, especially when they're young and growing up, they'll hunt with their mother.
That's right. Bobcats hunt with their mother.
Almost like she's teaching them how to hunt.
Yes. Let's come up with one more difference, but for the coyote.
I know one. Coyotes like to go out and play and sing, and I hear them at night. So that one really sticks out in my mind.
Coyotes sing and play. Remember, this is something that you could do at home as well, thinking about what is the same and what is different between animals or characters, anything really, in a story. Now, our last section is going to talk about narratives because we did start talking about that on Tuesday and how to write stories. Now, we talked about how to get started and really using your own ideas to gather your story forward. Well, we have a very special story today, and this comes to us written by Rowan E. He's a first grader going on to second grade, just like so many of you out there, and we wanted to thank him so much for sharing his story with us. And we're going to use his story to talk about the things that he did as a writer to make his story come alive. This is called The Monkey and the Banana. Once upon a time, there was a monkey and a banana. The monkey always tried to eat the banana for food. One day, the banana said, "This game of tag is fun." The monkey said, "I am actually trying to eat you." The banana suggested, "I'll give you some fruit, and for a trade, I want to play tag with you." So let's stop at that first part and let's take a look at some things that Rowan does as a writer to make his story come alive. One thing I notice about Rowan's story is that he gives us a situation to start off with, and he introduces his characters. There's a monkey and a banana, and the monkey is trying to eat the banana. This kind of sounds like a problem, right, Miss Berry?
Right, it really does, especially for the banana.
But then he twists it up a little bit and makes the story really interesting by telling us something that the banana says. What does the banana say?
This game of tag is fun.
So the banana doesn't actually think that he's being chased to be eaten. He thinks they're playing a game of tag.
You know, that's pretty hilarious. That's very funny.
And one of the things that Rowan also does as a writer is he gives us things that the characters are saying. That's something that you could do as a creative writer, is tell us the things that characters are saying.
And I noticed that he's using quotation marks to help us to see what the characters actually say, the parts that come out of their mouths.
Yes, that's how we tell the difference between what the narrator says and what the character says, are with quotation marks. So let's move on to the second
Okay,
part.
I can't wait to find out what happens.
That sounds like a great idea. I love fruit, and I love to play tag also. Okay, here's your fruit, stated the banana. The monkey ate all of his fruit. The monkey and the banana played tag together. The monkey and the banana lived happily ever after.
I
The
love
end.
ever happily ever after stories. They just make me feel good.
Right? And so one of the things that is interesting that Rowan does here as well is that he provides a solution to the original problem. The original problem was that the monkey was always trying to eat the banana. So the banana provided a possible solution. I'll give you some fruit, and then we can play. And so, okay, here's your fruit. That's our solution. And that leads us towards the end of our story. I got to tell you something else that I love. Stated, he found a new way to say said. This is something that you could do as a writer as well. You don't have to say said for everything. You can come up with new ways to involve some different words.
Well, like instead of saying walking, we said creeping.
Yes.
So there may be more interesting ways that help us to paint a better or clearer picture. And as authors, we get to choose our words.
Absolutely. And by the end of the story, he provides a closing line to make it clear to us that this is the end of his story, that he has provided a problem and a solution, and that's the story. It gives us that sense of closure. And that's something that you can do as a writer as well, is that your stories need some kind of a closure. So that way we know that part of the story is ending. So again, we wanted to thank Rowan for sharing his wonderful story with us.
Rowan, if you're watching, and I hope that he is, you did a fantastic job with your story. Thumbs up. Actually, 2 thumbs up.
And it was so interesting how he made the characters come alive. We could actually hear and see what was going on by the conversations that the monkey and the banana had with each other.
You know, the other thing that he did is I could very easily name the different story elements. The characters, the monkey and the banana. The setting, which is the when and the where. They were playing tag somewhere. And again, a setting, we don't always know where it is, but it's somewhere.
Yes.
And then there was the plot, the events. And he was very, very clear in the sequence or in the order in which things happened. That was something else that we talked about this week.
Absolutely. And that is something that we can do as creative and coherent writers, is that we can really build in the way that plot moves from beginning to end to make it clear as to what that story is going to be.
Because if Rowan had said at the beginning that they decided to play tag together, that wouldn't have made sense. The story would have been all jumbled up.
And so this is a great example of what a first grade writer can do at this stage by the end of first grade. As you notice, it doesn't always look exactly like some of our picture books, but that's okay. We are growing as writers every single day. Whew. We have done so much work today, Miss Mary.
You know, we've done so much work all week.
Yes, we learned a lot about different animals of New Mexico. We read some wonderful stories throughout the entire week, and we also got to dive deep with those stories and use them to grow our background knowledge and our understanding.
One of my favorite parts of the week was that we really got to explore the different habitats of New Mexico. I think one of the most interesting things that I learned was that we have tundras here in New Mexico.
Yes. And just today, we talked about adjectives and nouns. We learned some new vocabulary words and practiced our high frequency words. We compared and contrasted animals within our text. And we also got to take a look at a real writing from one of our first graders here in Albuquerque. This has been a fantastic week, and we look forward to seeing you again next week for when we explore animals throughout the world. And Miss Mary, I'm sorry to say that next week will be our last week.
Well, but we've had so much fun.
Absolutely. This has been Miss Maggie.
And Miss Mary.
We want to thank you again for joining us for At Home with ATS. We'll see you next week.
Bye.